Hey everyone, and welcome to Slumber Reads. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Liking the video helps out immensely, and it does only just take a quick second. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. We did just hit 138,000. I just want to say thank you. I've been here narrating stories for so many years at this point, and it just never gets old to me. And I really appreciate that there's still people that enjoy, new people coming in. I think all of that is really incredible. So just thank you to all of you, whether you're new here or if you've been here for a decade or whatever it may be. I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate it. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax. Enjoy the 2 hours of horror stories with no mid-roll ads, except for the ad break after this intro. There will not be any more ad breaks after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. I've never been much of a gamer, but every now and then I get swept up by a game. And it consumes all of my time. Most of my friends are gamers, but I've never been a fan of the co-op games they like to play. They like their super competitive shooters and MOBAs, where I'm more of a friend slop type of guy. I'll play single player games from time to time, but I'm more likely to just doom scroll Instagram or Reddit while YouTube fills in the background noise. My computer collects dust for months at a time. I think I enjoyed building the thing more than actually using it, so I end up bed rotting most of the time staring at my phone. Recently, while doom scrolling Instagram, I got a follow request from my old high school friend Johnny. I got a pit in my stomach. I hadn't talked to him in years. I wasn't so sure I wanted to reconnect. We were the best of friends, but that time of my life was some of my lowest moments. I had no interest in digging all that back up. I mean, would it hurt to just follow him back? We'll probably just have a quick catching up chat, and probably go back to ignoring each other. I went ahead and approved the follow request while following him back. He sent me a message almost immediately. Hey dude, how's it going? Yo, what's up? I'm good. You? Same. Hey, you still game? Yeah, from time to time. You want to join my Discord group? I'm trying to put together some game nights. I'm not so sure about this. I don't know how I feel about just jumping in Discord calls with my old best friend. I mean, we're adults. I'm sure he would understand if I was unavailable most of the time due to being busy. Yeah, sure. If it's on a day that I'm free, I can probably jump on. Rad. Here's the link. I reluctantly clicked the link he sent and joined his Discord group. Alright, I'm in. Cool. I'll be in touch. Sounds good. That wasn't too painful, but I'm sure we'll have to do the whole catching up thing if I ever do jump on a call with him. However, some time passed and I never heard anything new. This was somewhat of a relief. I'll be honest, I don't really use Discord. I'm a member of several groups, but I'm just not active in any of them, so I just have push notifications turned off on my phone. Recently, while talking to a coworker, the topic of games came up. You on Discord? He asked. Yeah, you want to connect? Yeah, what's your username? He pulled up his phone and opened Discord. I told him my username, and he searched it up. There, friend request sent. I then pulled out my phone and opened Discord. When I navigated to friend requests, I saw 2 of them. For now, I just accepted the one from my coworker. All done, I said while turning off the screen and pocketing my phone. Sweet. I'll let you know next time I'm on, and maybe we can play a match or 2. Sounds good. Later on, I opened up Discord to see who the other friend request was from. The username was 6 feet under 4U. They were from the group that Johnny invited me to. What the hell? I went ahead and approved it. I also turned on push notifications just in case my coworker messaged me. About an hour later, I got a message from 6 feet under 4U. Hey Ben, long time no see. It's Kate. My stomach dropped. This was the exact thing I was afraid of when Johnny first sent me that friend request. I didn't know he kept in touch with his ex-girlfriend. I could swear I remember them having the biggest fallout after graduation. I thought they hated each other. I guess they could be reconnecting after several years. I mean, that's probably pretty healthy. Hey Kate, how are you? Same ol', same ol'. Oh yeah, Mr. Foster's still giving you crap for your messy handwriting? LOL, yup, I think he's going to fail me. I keep telling you, he's willing to give out extra credit. I've missed you. Yeah, it's been a long time. Too long. I felt everything coming back. The mental pain, the physical anguish, the deep sadness. This was the last thing I ever wanted to happen in my life. I wish the past would just stay in the past. Hey, sorry to cut this short, but I need to clock into work. Oh, of course. We'll catch up later. Yeah, for sure. I dropped my phone on the floor to the side of my bed and rolled over. I cried for probably an hour. I moved on. Why are they doing this to me? I have a new life. I have a sense of purpose. The next day, while I was at work, I got another message from her. Hey. I left her on read and put my phone back in my pocket. She sent the same message a few days later, but I ignored it again. A few more days passed before she sent another. Wow, okay. I see how it is. A wave of guilt washed over me, so I finally replied. I'm sorry. I've been so busy lately, and I keep forgetting to respond. It's okay. I get it. I won't bother you. I don't know what to do. She doesn't deserve this, despite what I believed back then. She didn't do anything wrong. Sincerely, I'm sorry. We knew each other during a very difficult time in my life. I struggled with severe depression and really struggled day to day. You and Johnny popping back up into my life just brings it all back up to the surface. I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm just not sure I'm ready for all this. What do you mean by Johnny coming back into your life? I stared at her message for several moments. I have no idea what she's asking. I had no idea how to respond. Well, I didn't really keep in contact after high school. You know how it is. People grow apart. This was the best response I could think of. Do you mean me coming back into your life brought memories of Johnny? I was dumbfounded. What is she talking about? No. A few months ago I got a follow request out of nowhere from him on Instagram. I don't understand. What do you mean? Felt like she was gaslighting me. I was so confused. I don't know how else to say it. We connected over Instagram. We chatted a little bit before inviting me to the Discord group. Okay, fine. I get it. You don't want anything to do with me. You could have just said so. I can understand. But what you're doing right now is cruel beyond words. If you intended to make me cry, you did. I hope you're happy. I stared at this message for way too long, because she blocked me before I had a chance to respond. What is going on? I needed answers. I needed to message Johnny. There was one problem, though. I couldn't find his Instagram profile. I mean, that's not exactly unprecedented. I've had this happen before. Usually when someone's profile disappears overnight, it just turns out they deleted it. In fact, it happens all the time. Fine, I'll just message him on Discord. I just don't know what his username is. We never sent each other a friend request. I just joined his group. I navigated to the group and looked around. Since I don't really use Discord, I don't know all the ins and outs. Is there not a way to see all the members of a group? This is a lot harder than I thought it would be, so I just messaged the general chat. Hey Johnny, I don't know what your username is. Can you send me a friend request? It's Ben. Who's Johnny? He's the guy that invited me to this group. I don't think there's a Johnny in this group. No, there is. Like I said, he invited me to this group. Hey Ben, I think you're messaging the wrong group. I know that username. It's my coworker. I don't remember joining a group with him in it. I could have sworn this was the group Johnny invited me to. Oh, hey Philip. I must have gotten confused. My bad. All good, dude. Weird question, though. Is there someone in this group with the username 6 feet under for you? No. No. I don't think so. No. Okay, thanks. Never mind. What the hell? I'm so confused right now. Am I having the world's largest brain fart, or am I losing my mind? I spent the next couple hours searching up the username 6 feet under for you. I couldn't find anything. At some point I started wondering why I cared so much. The problem sorted itself out. I didn't want anything to do with them, and they were gone. I got my wish. I just felt a huge amount of guilt. I somehow really upset Kate, and I don't like hurting people. After a few weeks, everything went back to normal, and I forgot about it, at least until my mom messaged me on Facebook. Hey, just checking in. How's everything going? Hey, Mom. Everything's going well. How about you? Good, good. I was just going through old photos, and I came across a few with you and Johnny. Oh my God, it won't end. Even my mom won't let me keep it in the past. Oh yeah? Yeah, he was such a good kid, and you guys got along so well. I was typing out how we actually reconnected recently before she sent another message. It's such a shame about what happened. That's weird. I don't remember telling her about our falling out. As far as she knew, we just drifted apart. She sent another before I got the chance to respond. He had such a bright future ahead of him. I stared at that message for way too long. A deep anxiety arose from within me. How old would he be today? 37? Just a year younger than you, right? The memory of looking down at him lying in his casket returned to me. Mom, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot that I picked up a shift that starts in 10 minutes. I gotta go. Okay, hon. Be safe. I love you. Love you. I knew I had blocked out some memories from that time in my life, but I had no idea I blocked out something this big. How do you forget about something like that? The thing about deleting a social media account is that it's never really gone. If you change your mind, you can always have it reinstated. At this specific moment, I wish they could just stay deleted forever, because I'm looking at a message notification right now, one from an account that disappeared recently, and had just come back. It's exactly as the title of this post reads. My house is on the wrong side of the street. Well, I guess it was, but I'll get to that later. Yesterday I took my dog for a walk around the neighborhood. I always walked her around sunset, and the walk itself was only about a half an hour. However, this time as I walked down my street and the sky shone gold from the setting sun, something wasn't right. I've often heard that when you become familiar with a place, your brain subconsciously picks out things it remembers and things it doesn't. That is why sometimes seeing a familiar place from a new perspective makes it seem totally unfamiliar. My street? I hardly recognized it. Then I saw what it was. My house, which was always on the right side, was on the left side of the street. I approached my house and I actually did that thing they do in cartoons where they rub their eyes and then open them again as if that'll change anything. Well, nothing changed. To the left was my house, and to the right, where my house should have been, was an undeveloped lot. Although a sense of dread had overcome me, I felt myself moving forward slowly and mechanically. Eventually I felt a tug. I looked over my shoulder to see that my dog, Callie, hadn't moved any closer, and that tug that I'd felt was from the leash reaching its max length. Callie began to growl as I tugged at the leash gently. Callie, it's okay. Let's go. But it wasn't okay, and so I ended up listening to Callie. Alright, let's get the hell out of here. And so we walked again. I don't know why, but I figured that maybe if we just did the walk again, something would change. My street is technically in a suburban area, but it's pretty forested, so while on my street, I can't see other streets. I'd always thought it nice, but as we walked down our street again, I started to have second thoughts. Damn. My house was still to the left and, in addition, the lights were all off. That wasn't how I'd left them. It seemed that my street, in general, was even more messed up the second time around. Pretty immediately my mind connected that maybe going for a second walk had actually ruined things further. I didn't know for sure, but I didn't try it again. This time I tried to make a call. I tried to make a call to my sister. Thankfully it rang, but unfortunately I never got an answer. I left a somewhat panicked voicemail asking if she was alright, and then tried my best friend. He didn't pick up either. I looked around. The entire rest of the street seemed normal beside being oddly quiet. I walked to the top of my driveway. Do I just go inside? Maybe I was the one acting strange. Has it always been this way? That seemed more likely than that my house had inexplicably moved. My dog barked. I jumped. Callie, you scared me. Callie was barking at the undeveloped lot that had replaced my house. She kept barking, and I stood frozen. I was trying to make out what it was she might have been barking at. Nothing. There was nothing. No movement, no sound. Just eerie silence. Callie began to whimper and cowered low to the ground. She began moving towards me, never taking her eyes off the lot. Screw it. I picked her up and quickly made my way onto my porch and then inside my house. Every light in my house was off, but I made good time turning them all on and locking every possible entrance into my house. Those moments in the darkness, just expecting something to be waiting in one of the dark corners, were the most confused, terrified moments of my life. However, nothing ever jumped out at me. My house was empty. Callie found a place to hide under my couch, and I sat at my kitchen counter contemplating my next move. I didn't feel the need to call the police. For some reason, I felt that it was possible that I was the one who had this all wrong. But then my phone rang. It was my sister. I picked it up and asked, "Hey, it's good to hear from you. I know this is going to sound crazy, but what side of the street is my house on? Like, when you're walking down it. You need to turn your lights back off." "What?" "Your lights. Turn them off." Her tone was flat, very matter of fact. It almost felt cold. I don't understand. In my peripheral vision, I watched something quickly drop out of my view of the kitchen window. I wasn't sure what I'd seen, or if I'd seen anything at all. I looked down at my phone, and the call had ended. What should I do? Was that even my sister? If not, maybe I shouldn't listen to her. I looked back to the window. I swore I'd seen something move away from it. Okay, I think I would turn my lights off. I moved towards my kitchen light switch, when underneath my feet I heard the creaking of footsteps. I stopped to listen. Creak. One single footstep, and then they stopped as well. It wasn't possible that someone was below me, because my house didn't have a basement, and also, the footsteps sounded as if someone was walking inverted to me, which definitely wasn't possible. 3 more creaks. The footsteps picked up again, this time quicker and more distinct. I followed the footsteps from the kitchen to the living room. Up until this point, nothing in my house had changed besides its location. The living room, however, all the furniture besides the couch and the wall decor had been cleared out. I must not have noticed in my scramble to get all of the lights back on. The floor was just bare hardwood except for a door in the center of the room. And no, this wasn't a trapdoor or some sort of hatch. It was a regular wooden door laying horizontal to the floor around it. I heard the footsteps walk right up to the door, and I heard a knock. There was a moment of silence. Then another knock came, this time in a triplet. Callie, come on." But she wasn't coming out from under the couch. The door opened. I couldn't see where exactly the door opened into, but a light sniffle arose from it. Whatever was on the other side seemed to be crying. I backed out of the living room, slowly listening to every sniffle and sob that came from the door. Suddenly a leg, clothed in brown slacks and dress shoes, casually moved through the doorframe. I immediately moved out of the living room and skulked up the stairs, trying not to make a sound. I remember whatever it was. It was holding a briefcase. I remember watching the leg and subsequent body that followed adjust to the shift in gravity in a manner that almost resembled gliding. I made my way up the stairs and into my bedroom. I didn't hesitate. I quietly opened my bedroom window and calculated the damage I'd take from the fall. There was a knock on my bedroom door. Whatever it was moving quickly. I looked over my shoulder, a little lost for what to do. Then I heard the thing's triple knock, which previously had been the precursor to it just letting itself in. So I lowered myself out of my bedroom window and prepared to drop. As my bedroom left my view, I saw the hallway light shine in as the door opened. Once again I heard that crying. Moments before I let myself drop, I saw the start of a very tall man's head wearing a bowler hat scraping along my bedroom ceiling. I didn't have much time to contemplate this, though, as I soon made contact with the ground. Thankfully, I landed okay, and the adrenaline got me to my feet. I made a break for the road and ran up it without looking back. "Callie, please stay under that couch." As I neared the top of the street, I caught a glimpse into one of my neighbor's houses. The front door was wide open, and hanging by a single hinge. The living room curtains were drawn and I could see blood splatter staining the wall in a morbid display. I picked up my pace again and made it off my street. However, I kept moving until I found a main road away from the street. It was then that I noticed that during all this, the sun had never fully set. In fact, it seemed that it hadn't moved at all. Eventually I found a gas station and sat out front for hours. It was just nice to be around people coming and going. I felt secure. After some time, my friend came and picked me up. I stayed at his house for the night. I was unsure of what to tell him, but he's a good guy and let me stay without needing a reason. I slept horribly, and after some painfully long hours, morning came. Around noon we drove over to my house. It was on the right side of the street, just like normal. I went inside cautiously. My friend must have thought I'd lost my mind. Callie was fine, but her leash was still on. I walked up the street and to my surprise, my neighbor's house was empty, a for sale sign in the front yard. There was no sign of him. That wasn't how I remembered it, and something inside me was scared to ask where he'd gone, or why he decided to sell. I'm writing all of this now to share my experience. I have no clue what happened to me last night. It feels like I imagined the whole thing, but I know I didn't. I haven't really known the best way to go on with my day, so I spent the rest of it driving around with Callie. Although as I'm writing this, I'm getting a call from my friend. It seems he sent me a text too. Let's see. It reads, "Yo, what I'm about to ask is going to seem crazy, but just please answer me anyway." My grandmother died 3 weeks ago. I found my grandmother's journal. The last 50 years were spent keeping the water babies quiet. My grandmother died on a Tuesday. By Friday, I was standing alone in her house overlooking the Snake River, wondering why she'd insisted I be the one to clean it out. She lived outside Massacre Rocks for over 60 years. The locals knew her as the old woman who carved toys out of driftwood and left them along the riverbank every month. People laughed about it. "She's feeding ghosts," they'd joke. She never corrected them. Growing up, I'd ask why she made so many little wooden horses, dolls, and boats. "They're gifts," she'd tell me. "For who?" She'd smile without looking at me. "For the children who never went home." I assumed she meant the old water babies legend every kid in Idaho grows up hearing. Supposedly, if you wandered too close to the river after dark, you'd hear children crying from the water. My grandmother took it more seriously than anyone else. She refused to let us whistle near the river. She never stayed out after sunset, and every month, without fail, she'd disappear for exactly 1 hour, carrying a basket of handmade toys. After she died, I found out why. I was moving her bedroom dresser when one of the floorboards shifted. Underneath was a narrow compartment, just large enough to hold a metal box. Inside were 24 leather journals. The first one was dated 1973. The last ended 3 days before she died. The first page read, "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. The toys in the shed must be taken to the river before the next new moon. If you fail, they'll begin crying again. Don't let them finish." I rolled my eyes. Old age does strange things to people. I almost threw the journal into the trash. Then I opened the second page. It wasn't stories. It was a list. January 1974. 3 wooden horses. No crying afterward. February 1974. 1 doll. 1 carved duck. The smallest one followed me halfway home. Ignored it. Everything stayed quiet. The entries continued like that for decades. Every month, every offering, every sound she'd heard, every mistake she'd survived. One line appeared over and over. Never answer when they know your name. I still didn't believe any of it until I found the shed. Hundreds of unfinished toys sat on shelves. Each was tagged with a month and year. The shelves suddenly stopped 6 weeks ago. The last tag read, July, Daniel, my name. I told myself she'd prepared it before she got sick. Nothing more. That evening I carried the journals onto the porch with a beer and started reading. Around sunset the birds stopped. Not gradually. All at once. The silence was so complete I could hear the river nearly half a mile away. Then came the crying. It sounded like a toddler. Soft, somewhere beyond the trees. I stood and listened. Another voice joined in. Then another. Within seconds, there were dozens. Children, crying together. I grabbed my flashlight and started toward the river before common sense caught up with me. By the time I reached the bank, the crying had stopped. The Snake River looked perfectly calm beneath the fading light. I laughed at myself. Then someone giggled. Right behind me, I spun around. Nobody. The beam of my flashlight caught only sagebrush and cottonwoods. Then a little girl's voice drifted across the water. Daniel. I froze. The journals slipped from under my arm. One landed open in the dirt. The page I saw made my stomach drop. They always say your name first. Something splashed. Not like a fish. Like someone stepping into shallow water. Another splash. Closer. Then another. I swept the flashlight over the river. Nothing. The voice came again. Daniel. This time it sounded impatient. I backed away without answering. The journals had another rule. If they call twice, leave. If they call 3 times, don't look in the water. My foot caught a rock. The flashlight flew from my hand. It landed facing the river. The beam illuminated dozens of tiny footprints leading out of the water. They weren't there a second earlier. Each footprint was no bigger than my palm. Wet, fresh, all leading toward me. The crying returned, except now it wasn't coming from the river. It surrounded me. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the flashlight's beam. I didn't wait for the third call. I ran. Branches slapped my face. The journals bounced against my chest. Behind me I heard dozens of tiny feet splashing through puddles that hadn't been there before. I slammed the front door and locked it. The crying stopped immediately. I didn't sleep. At sunrise I convinced myself I'd imagined everything. Stress, grief, too much reading. I packed my car. Before leaving I decided to burn the journals. As I carried them outside, something caught my eye. The basket my grandmother always used for the toys sat beside the porch. It hadn't been there yesterday. Inside was a single, unfinished wooden horse. Tied around its neck was one of my grandmother's handwritten notes. It said only, "You answered." I read it 3 times before realizing something. I hadn't. I never spoke. Then I remembered. When I dropped my flashlight, when I saw the footprints, I whispered one word. "Oh." I didn't think that counted. Apparently, they did. I've been back home for 4 days now. Every night around sunset, I hear children crying somewhere outside my apartment. The neighbors don't seem to notice. Yesterday I found muddy footprints in my hallway. They're getting closer to my bedroom. I've started carving toys. I don't know why. I've never worked with wood before, but my hands seem to remember. Tonight, I finished the first horse. When I turned it over, there were words carved neatly into the bottom. Not in my handwriting. August. 1 horse. Too late. As a born and raised Iowan, I'm no stranger to tornadoes. Most Midwesterners are accustomed to tornado season. It's just a fact of life here. We tend to be pretty blase about tornadoes since we're so accustomed to experiencing multiple tornado warnings every spring and summer. Yet it's exceedingly rare to actually see a tornado in person, let alone have one strike your home. That being said, I'm one of the unlucky few. The year was 1994, and I was an obnoxious college freshman at a small private university, about 2 hours from my hometown. Close enough to feel familiar, yet far enough to feel new. It was the second semester, and I had just moved out of the cramped dorms and into a shabby, yet surprisingly spacious 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of town, with my new roommate, Muyo. Muyo and his parents were Bosnian refugees who had relocated to Iowa the previous year to escape the Bosnian War. Muyo's father was a doctor, and his mother a teacher, and they were brilliant people. But since neither of their licenses were valid in the U.S., they found work where they could, in one of the many meatpacking plants. Muyo was a pre-med student, following in his father's footsteps, with a brain to match. Not gonna lie, I was jealous of his work ethic. 2 semesters in, and my major was still undeclared. I was less concerned about figuring out what I was going to do with my life than I was with beating Mortal Kombat and finding upperclassmen to buy booze for me. I was a bit nervous moving in with Muyo, coming from small-town Iowa and not knowing a thing about Bosnia or its culture, but Muyo and I were fast friends. The catalyst being our shared love of video games. Back home, all Muyo had was a knockoff NES called a Pegasus. He was enamored with my SNES, and I was more than happy to show him the ropes. When he wasn't studying and I wasn't partying, we'd spend our free time combing through flea markets for discount games. I helped him practice his English in exchange for him helping me with my chemistry lab reports. Doing them for me, and his mom was always bringing over homemade burek. I helped loosen him up, and he helped keep me accountable. Overall, it was a great arrangement for both of us. It was a typical Friday in late April, a bit chilly with a pleasantly warm breeze. I generally don't keep a close eye on the weather, but I do recall seeing on the local news that there was a moderate risk of severe thunderstorms that evening, including the possibility of tornadoes. It was a pretty typical day of classes, one that wasn't especially memorable. I overheard chatter about the incoming storm, but mostly in the context of classmates debating whether they should hit the bars after class or stay in. No one seemed especially worried about the threat of severe weather, just trying to plan around it. 'Twas the Midwestern way. Muyo's final class ended an hour before mine, so it was no surprise that he had beaten me home. Muyo gazed out the living room window at the sky. The soft jazz of the Weather Channel emanated from the TV. I glanced at the screen as I sat my bag down. Severe thunderstorm watch until 2 a.m. Tonight, thunderstorms. Some possibly severe with tornadoes. Lows in the upper 40s. Chance of rain, 90%. It's probably going to be a bust. I said before taking in a deep breath and blowing methodically into our copy of Super Mario Kart before sliding it into the console. No one else seems all that worried about it. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, Muyo grunted, plopping down onto the couch beside me. We played a few rounds, ordered a pizza for dinner, and eventually made our way to our own rooms. By 9:30, there was a light drizzle outside, and the sound quickly lulled me to sleep. It felt like I had just fallen asleep when a loud crack of thunder made me shoot up in bed. As my eyes peeled open, I was flashbanged by a brilliant bolt of lightning, followed by another immediate crack of thunder that shook the house. I groggily sat up, peeking through the blinds out the window behind my bed. Outside, the wind raged, the trees surrounding the house bending and buckling as the rain seemed to fall sideways, blown by the gusts. There were no streetlights this far outside of town, but the strobe-like lightning illuminated my view. I tried to turn on my bedside lamp to glance at the clock, only to be met with darkness. Crap, I thought. Power must be out. Almost immediately, a low drone was audible beneath the cacophony, which quickly grew in pitch and volume, a discordant, wailing moan. The tornado sirens were going off. As soon as I sat up and prepared to get Muyo, I heard a frantic knock on my door. Before I could respond, the door swung open, revealing a pale, trembling Muyo, flashlight in hand. I could see tears welling up in his eyes as he stammered. Whoa, what's going on, man? I asked, putting my hand on his shoulder. It's okay, it's just the sirens. Sirens. Something so ubiquitous. With severe weather to me, but to Muyo, they meant something different. My heart dropped when I realized why he was so distraught. Hey, I said, not really sure how to handle the situation. It's alright, you're safe. We're safe. Muyo buried his face in his hands, choking back a quiet sob before nodding slowly. Christ, the stuff this guy must have gone through. It's just a tornado warning. It doesn't mean there's actually a tornado, just that there could be one. Muyo tensed, his voice agitated and panicked. Sirens don't sound for no reason. I couldn't help but flinch slightly, startled by the sudden outburst. It was clear that Muyo was deeply troubled by the situation, and I honestly couldn't blame him. Muyo took a deep breath, his gaze locked to the floor. Sorry, I didn't... Nah, man, you're good. Let's head down to the basement. I pulled the top blanket off my bed, slinging it over my shoulder. I reached into the nightstand drawer and grabbed my hand crank weather radio. With the power out, it was our only way to know what was going on out there. I kept my hand on Muyo's shoulder, sort of pushing him along as we crossed the house. As we descended the basement stairs, the sirens became more and more muffled, and Muyo seemed to relax a bit. The basement was small and unfinished, grimy, dusty, and spattered with spider webs. The boiler was stationed at the center of the basement, and besides the circuit breaker, was the only thing in the room. We seldom went down into the basement, pretty much just on the rare occasion that we needed to flip the circuit breaker. I spread the blanket across the floor in front of the boiler, giving us a more comfortable place to sit. Muyo propped the flashlight against the boiler and began to turn the radio crank. The radio slowly came to life as Muyo fiddled with the dial, scanning for an audible station. Baseball-sized hail and damaging wind gusts exceeding 75 miles per hour across the region. Radar indicates... The National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning for... The robotic voice proceeded to slowly list multiple counties, including ours. In Iowa, until 3:45 a.m. At 2:37 a.m., a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located east of our town. Take cover now. Move to an interior room on the lowest floor of a sturdy building. Avoid windows. If in a mobile unit, a vehicle, or outdoors, move to the closest substantial shelter and protect yourself from flying debris. If no shelter is available, lie flat in the nearest ditch or other low spot. Doppler radar has indicated this storm may contain Pa told us all to go inside. The size of baseballs or larger. Take cover now. There was no pause or change in cadence or tone when the voice deviated from the script. As the local weather broadcast resumed, Muyo and I exchanged confused glances. Pa told us all to go inside? Muyo slowly repeated. What do they mean by that? I shrugged. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. It was probably a mistake. I suggested. Maybe someone at the station hit the wrong button. Muyo didn't seem satisfied, but slowly nodded. We continued listening to the local weather reporter as she detailed the storm heading towards us. Wind gusts of up to 60 miles per hour may cause... Another one? I scoffed. Christ, that was fast. As the robotic voice began its spiel, I quickly realized that the message was identical to the one that had been broadcast a few minutes ago. At 2:37 a.m., a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located. The sky was green. The roosters were crowing. Cover now. Move to an interior room on the lowest floor of a sturdy building. Avoid windows. If in a mobile home, a vehicle, or outdoors, move to the closest substantial shelter and protect yourself from flying debris. If no shelter is available, lie flat in the nearest ditch or other low spot. Doppler radar has indicated this storm may contain destructive hail the size of baseballs or larger. Take cover now. The voice interrupted itself, then continued without missing a beat. Something's wrong, Muyo muttered. Should we call the station? I think they've got their hands full right now, I said dismissively, trying to mask my own sense of unease. I bet the signal's jumbled or something. I don't know how it works. Probably best not to leave the basement now anyways, Muyo observed, clearly a bit dissatisfied but preoccupied with listening intently to the broadcast as the storm intensified. The wind howled outside, punctuated by crashes of thunder. Based on what the weather report was saying, the worst of the storm had reached us. We were in the middle of it now. I stared at the concrete wall, aimlessly tracing shapes with my finger on the blanket, as the reporter discussed the wind speeds occurring in various communities. It sounded as though our town was in the lead. Muyo remained tense, slowly nodding as though he were chewing and digesting every spoken word. Meanwhile, just a few miles south, we've received reports of wind gusts reaching... And then it made a lot of loud sounds, and a loud beep sound. What the hell? I exclaimed with half a laugh. What is it this time? Same as before. Severe thunderstorm, take cover, yada yada. If no shelter is available, lie flat in the nearest ditch or other low spot. Doppler radar. Ma put me in the cellar. She said I had to pray. I prayed we'd be safe. Destructive hail the size of baseballs or larger. Take cover now. The look of discomfort on Muyo's face echoed my own feelings. Is someone pranking us or something? I said with a chuckle that hardly masked my nervousness. What's the joke? Muyo challenged, and I had no response. The broadcast resumed, muffled by the sounds of hail pelting the roof. Radar indicated Hook Echo just east of... And then more beeping sounds. Ugh, I rolled my eyes, dramatically flopping onto my back. Can they please stop with that tone? In all honesty, I was thoroughly unsettled and confused. Why did they keep interrupting the broadcast with the same alert message? And why was the narrator interjecting random statements? I almost had to laugh it off to keep myself from getting freaked out. If in a mobile home, a vehicle, or outdoors, move to the closest substantial shelter. The chickens were screaming. Ma was crying. The wind smelled like dirt and metal. Lie flat in the nearest ditch or other low spot. Doppler radar has indicated this storm may contain destructive hail the size of baseballs or larger. Take cover now. I felt a chill run down my spine. As the storm intensified outside, the sirens began to sound once more. I looked at Muyo and saw him swallow hard, his eyes fixated on the wall. It's just a storm, I reminded him, keeping my voice soft and low. And by the sound of it, the worst is almost past. Then we can get back to bed. With a slight smile, I quipped, if any of my professors count me absent tomorrow, I'm suing. I need my beauty sleep. The corner of Muyo's lip curved slightly, but I could tell that he was troubled. Troubled by the sirens, troubled by the storm, troubled by the odd emergency alerts. He knew something was wrong, and I think I did too. I was just too scared to accept it. Surely it was just a station error. Surely. Do you think there's actually going to be a tornado? Muyo asked. Statistically, no. Personally, he glanced at me. I smirked. No. More beeping noises. Speak of the devil. The National Weather Service has issued a It all went quiet again. I knew God would help. I ran outside to tell Ma and Pa. Take cover now. It was only a few minutes later when the sirens finally stopped. The thunder no longer shook the house, and the hail had slowed to a lazy, rhythmic thudding. The reporter announced that all tornado warnings had expired, and the broadcast promptly came to a close as pre-recorded talk show segments began to play. It was almost 4 in the morning, and despite the fact that I was definitely going to be using this as an excuse to skip class, I was eager to get back to bed. The instant I stood up, the radio blared. More beeping noises. What the... After the long tone, there was silence. Nothing but faint static for around 10 seconds. Then the voice spoke. I saw Ma sleeping in the old oak tree. Her dress was tangled on a branch. One of her shoes was higher up than she was. The chickens were spread across 3 fields. I thought somebody had taken them apart. I found Pa in the cornfield. I knew it was him because of his suspenders. He wasn't put together right anymore. The wind started to howl again. I tried to carry Pa to the cellar, but he was too heavy. I was too slow. Take cover now. At this point, I was over it. I turned the radio off and motioned for Muyo to stand. Come on, I said, picking up the blanket and shaking off the dust. Let's go back upstairs. We're good now. Wait, Muyo interjected. If it's saying take cover, shouldn't we... Take cover from what? It's over. Thing is just glitching or something. Muyo opened his mouth slightly as though he wanted to say something. I spoke for him. Look, I don't know what kind of pretentious art project that was, but I'm not going to sit here and listen to slam poetry at 4 a.m. Let's go. But it doesn't make sense. Exactly. My mind was swarming with questions, and surely so was Muyo's. But I was too tired to question anything, too tired to care. I tucked the radio into my hoodie pocket and started up the stairs. Take cover now. I stumbled, barely catching myself. What the hell? I pulled out the radio and checked to make sure I had turned it off. And sure enough, I had. Any sense of unease I had been feeling was now overtaken by annoyance. You know, I'm just gonna leave it down here, I said less than graciously, tossing the radio onto the concrete floor. The plastic casing cracked on impact. I couldn't care less. I was going to bed as soon as my foot hit the first step. Take cover now. Take cover now. Take cover now. Take cover. At this point, I screamed in frustration, banging my fist on the wooden banister. Jesus Christ, can you shut up? Muyo grabbed my shoulder hard, snapping me out of my rage. I spun around and his eyes were wide. Shh, listen. The radio stopped, and as my ears acclimated to the silence, I could make out a faint, distant sound, like a car driving up the road. No, more like a semi. Actually, as the sound grew louder, It was distinctly recognizable as the sound of a train. My heart stopped as Muyo and I exchanged a look of horror. Take cover now. I barely remember what happened next. Adrenaline took over. I remember Muyo and I huddling beneath the stairs, throwing the blanket over ourselves and shrinking as small as we could. What was once a faint rumbling was now becoming an unbearably loud roar. I felt a sharp pain in my head as my ears popped. For a brief moment there was deafening silence, followed by a cacophony of shattering glass, splintering wood, warping metal. I felt my brain rattling against my skull. My flesh pulled taut as the wind tried to rip it from my bones. And then, merciful nothingness. The house had endured a direct hit from the tornado. All that was left was a pile of rubble, obscuring a miraculously pristine basement. I believe 2 or 3 other homes endured minor damage, but thankfully no other parties were injured. And as miserable as the recovery was, my body was effectively one giant bruise. Muyo and I both got off about as easily as someone hit directly by a tornado could hope for. If I hadn't listened to Muyo, I wouldn't be alive to tell this story. But more perplexingly, neither of us would be alive if we had not heeded the mysterious warning. Over 30 years later, I find myself hunkered down in my basement with my wife and month-old daughter as the sirens blare outside. She gently rocks and hushes the baby as I shoot out a quick text. Yo, Doc, you in your safe place? An almost instantaneous response. LOL, Rich coming from you. Yeah, we're in the basement. Tell the baby I said hi. I chuckle, leaning over to kiss my daughter's forehead. The sirens don't last long, leaving only the soft rumbling of thunder in the distance and the rhythmic tapping of raindrops hitting the roof. It's rather cozy. Think we're good to head upstairs, babe? Looks like we're in the all clear. My wife holds up her phone with the weather radar app open to show me, and the silence is broken by the harsh screech of an incoming emergency alert. Our daughter startles awake and begins crying as we fumble with our phones to silence the blaring. As my wife shushes the baby, I glance down at the screen. Emergency alert. National Weather Service. Tornado warning in this area until 8:30 p.m. CST. Take shelter now in a basement or an interior room on the lowest floor of a sturdy building. If you are outdoors in a mobile home or in a vehicle, move to the closest substantial shelter and protect yourself from flying debris. I sat in the basement with my wife and month-old daughter. I already knew what came next. Can I tell you my biggest fear? It's sort of a silly one, and I've never really heard anyone else talk about it. But I'm terrified of being predictable. When I was in kindergarten, we learned what the word meant in this huge picture book full of big words. My teacher would tell us a story from the book, have us guess a few words, then give us the answer. And it had been fun for the first few words. The ones I can remember being these cute animals, baking for the word decadent, this lizard learning the word humid, stuff like that. The word predictable had this story attached. Of course, paraphrased, my memory isn't that good. Every day, a man wakes up in the same house, puts on the same clothes, and eats the same breakfast. He gets into the same car he's always had, goes to the same job he's always worked, drives home on the same route, then goes to bed to have the same day all over again. Pretty depressing for kindergarten, right? I can vividly recall what the guy looked like in the book. This pale man slumped into a purple couch, bored eyes looking forward at nothing. I remember thinking he looked like he was melting. When I looked at my folder that night, I watched the plastic crinkle over my math homework and thought of the homework I had done last night, of all the homework I had done for the past year. Subsequently, I burst into tears. When my mother had walked over and asked what was wrong, I blubbered. My life is so predictable. So, with that in mind, you could see how being stuck in a time loop is my personal hell. I've been stuck in May 11th, 2026 for a while. I want to say a few months now. I'm not the best at keeping track of time. I've tried the usual tactics for escape, like staying up all night. Hasn't worked. Day stays the same when it hits 12. Offing myself. I just wake back up on the same day, giving a beautiful monologue admitting my faults. Only worked for the dude in Groundhog Day. Stuff like that. I'm not even sure this post will last a full day, since everything always resets. So yeah, being stuck wouldn't have been too bad, even with my fear of monotony. I mean, there are some pros, like eating as much as I want without gaining any weight, or having all the time in the world to do what I like. But if that were the case, I think it would have taken me way longer to finally sit down and write this out. No, that isn't why I'm writing. I'm writing because I got even more stuck. It happened while I was having brunch with one of my friends. It was spontaneous, since there isn't really any planning ahead for me. I was listening to her tell me about the salon she works at when the idea first entered my head. What if I told her? Miraculously, I hadn't tried to tell anyone yet. I guess coping with the embarrassment of someone not believing me was worse than repeating the same day over and over. Odette, I began, trying to find the words. Can I tell you something crazy? Crazier than the salon? I fidget with my straw. I'd say so. She shrugs, taking a bite out of a scone, and I take it as a go-ahead. I think I'm stuck in a time loop. It feels really, really cringy to say, even if I am being genuine. Odette, however, just rolls her eyes. How very cliché of you. I'm being serious. A few people turn to look our way. I've lived today a bunch of times. I don't know what to do about it. I mean, I've tried almost everything. I watch her eyebrows furrow, and I silently hope she won't ask me to tell her what's going to happen next, since despite living today a million times, I haven't repeated brunch with her yet. But she never asks anything. In fact, her face seems stuck in the same expression, a slight frown tugging at her features. Hello, Odette? I wave my hand in front of her face, hoping that she was yanking my chain or something, but she doesn't move, aside from her expression. When I turn my head to look at the other tables, I realize that the restaurant ambiance sounds awful, just a cacophony of a few words being repeated. The same forks hitting the plates at the same time, a baby crying in the same pitch and tone repeatedly. For a few minutes, all I do is sit. I get up, and Odette doesn't say anything, her eyebrows furrowing again. I don't bother making an excuse for myself. Stepping onto the street, it sounds worse, louder than it did in the restaurant. I pick my way across the street, avoiding the cars as they drove forward a few inches, then returned to the same spot. I was stuck in the same minute. You know, the same day on loop isn't as bad as they tell you it is. I mean, sure, there are downsides, but as long as you fill your days with activity, and you don't mind being alone, it isn't all bad. You can still talk to people then. You still get your sunsets and sunrises. You still have the nights to sleep in. You still remember what silence is. The same minute is hell. I'm surprised I haven't lost my mind yet, hearing the same noises over and over again. But even still, being stuck in the same minute isn't what inspired me to write this post. About 7 hours ago, I was still walking around trying to tune out the noise enough to think. About 7 hours ago, I bumped into someone on the street. I apologized without thinking, and they did too, then kept on walking. It was only after I was a few feet away that it dawned on me that I bumped into someone. I turned to watch them walk away, only to find that they had stopped too, their backs still turned to me. I ran all the way home. I didn't stick around to find out if they were friendly or not. I'm sitting at my computer now. It's a miracle that my computer is letting me type, an even bigger miracle that I've been focused enough to actually write. I just want to know if anybody else is experiencing this. It'd be a little comfort to know I'm not alone. Please feel free to reach out. I promise. If you are, I'll talk. I have all the time in the world. Reddit won't let me update this draft. It just keeps loading, loading, loading. God, I hope this posts. It was supposed to be a perfectly normal family outing. My mom, my dad, my sister, my baby brother, and me. We were a middle-class family living in southern Manchester in the 90s, in a classic suburban home in the Heatons. I stayed with my parents and siblings, never really moving out of the house or neighborhood while living with them. Usually my mother woke my sister and me for school. We'd get breakfast and walk to the nearest school district we were enrolled in. The routine was normal. Wake, eat, school, and home. Seldom would we get out as a family to a shopping center, or the piers, where we'd have a relatively good meal of either fried food, fast food, street food, or mom would just propose to cook at home, to all of our dismay. But on one spring evening in February, my dad came home with a big grin. The man rushed to my mother, who was cooking in the kitchen with Troy sitting on a high chair, devouring colored blocks bigger than his mouth. We won the free dinner," Dad said. "Oh my God, how's that possible?" Dad shrugged. He chuckled to himself before shoving an envelope into Mom's hands. "I don't know either. I called them earlier and they asked me a bunch of questions about our food preferences. He had a lot of questions about allergens, but I reassured him nobody was sensitive to anything." This is great news. Orago is extremely exclusive. I hear those snooty shallots in the Revlon counter constantly talking about months-long bookings. Mom held the letter, reading the print on the page, as I tried to keep my attention solely focused on my homework on the dining table. Her grin faltered slightly as she read deeper into the print. "Oh, dinner is scheduled in April." Her smile was plastered back on as she looked up at Dad before continuing to cook. I had practically forgotten about that whole conversation until April of that year, when I got home from school disheveled from playing soccer with my schoolmates. Mom wasn't pleased, saying I should have gone home earlier and cleaner, before telling me to get into the bath and wear the outfit on my bed she picked out. "Alan, to the bath, now." Her voice lingered. The outfit looked brand new, or I just never wore it enough to notice, as vests weren't really my thing even then, especially when I wore them over a shirt and under a coat. Time practically moved faster than it usually did when your family is in a frenzy, until we found ourselves in Dad's car, on the way to spinning fields. That part of the city looked mesmerizing from inside the car. We only ever passed by only to get to another point before. But to really see the tall skyscrapers and commercial buildings in its peak bustling hour feels different when you knew the destination was exactly there. "You'd better be on your best behavior when we get there," Mom said. Claire sank into her seat, unhappy with how she looked in her frilly emerald dress. "Tell that to Ivan." "I only fight back when you start it," I retorted, leading to Mom having to tell us both off while Troy sat happily in his car seat in a small but adorable suit. The car stopped in front of the garden-like driveway, where men in velvet blue uniforms waited by a golden revolving door near high-paned windows. After Dad handed the keys and claimed a ticket from the valets, we were led by an escort up to the restaurant, where my sister and I ogled at the entrance. You could see the giant aquarium from the outside, while the nearby wall lit up with the establishment's name and logo, Orago's. A waitress let us in after the maitre d' had a brief exchange with my dad. Claire looked just as mesmerized at the restaurant as I was, never having seen anything like it before. We were used to the yellow and red, ketchup and mustard type of interior from fast food places. To see a fancy restaurant was a brand new experience for us. She led us to a darker spot in the restaurant, which had a Japanese screen keeping privacy between the tables. Our area had 5 seats and a high chair surrounding a round table, topped with a tablecloth that had one too many layers forming swags around the table. I rushed to sit near the window, seeing the entirety of London's skyline from the view. Claire was mad she didn't get to it first, but couldn't do much about it. First come, first served. She knew the rules. Please get comfortable. I will be back with refreshments and your food cards, the waitress said. Mom was seated beside Dad, while Claire was seated beside me, and Troy was seated in the provided high chair beside Mom. Mom waited for the waitress to be fully gone before pulling out a digital camera to start taking photos of everyone and everything around her. Meredith is going to fume seeing these photos, she said, jeering behind the camera. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Dad mumbled to himself. Honey, what are you doing? There are 5 seats. Yeah, because there are 5 of us, Mom chortled. No, I already told them Troy needed a high chair instead. Well, this table was probably made for 5. Dad shrugged, letting Mom's words brush off his thoughts as we all waited patiently for the waitress to come back. She did, not long after, with a cart full of drinks and menus. She asked Claire and me if we wanted sodas or juice. I had a Coke, while she had sparkling apple juice. She gave Troy his own small cup of orange juice. She turned to Mom and Dad, asking which they preferred. We'll have the red, Dad said, as Mom nodded. The waitress spoke a bunch of wine jargon, talking about how old the wine was before uncorking the bottle in front of us, causing Claire to jolt. That's scary. I don't think I like wine, she said. More for me and Troy. She made a disgusted expression as the waitress began to fill the wine glasses on the table with wine. First Mom's, then Dad's, then the third wine glass by the vacant seat. My parents paused, the drink barely touching their lips as they looked at her. Sweetie, who's... My mom chuckled before putting the drink down. Who is that supposed to be for? The waitress glanced at them. Her polite eyes hadn't wavered. Your guest, of course, she said, smiling before walking away with the beverage cart. Mom and Dad stared at the extra wine glass. I'll drink it, Mom said, brushing off the tension with an outstretched hand. No, just leave it there, Dad said. Claire was too engrossed in the menu, reading the names off the food card, while Troy suckled on the sippy cup full of orange juice. Claire. I held my sister's arm as she brushed me off, annoyed. What? Did you put the juice in his bottle? I asked. What are you talking about? She paused as we both watched our baby brother, not noticing the fallen plastic cup that was once filled with orange juice roll under the table. What on earth did you two do? Mom said, seeing Troy's baby bottle full of orange juice. It wasn't me, we said in unison. Why would you do this? Who did this? Mom took Troy's orange bottle as he began crying. The table was a bustling cacophony of familiar exchange. For a moment, we forgot we were in a fine dining establishment. Mom was scolding us. Troy was sobbing loudly. Dad drank Mom's wine, while Claire and I tried to convince her we were innocent. Enough, she snapped, silencing Claire and me. Mom took Troy from his chair to calm him from crying, but even within her arms, he bawled, until she paced, walking around the table, whispering pleas for him to quiet down before we got kicked out of the establishment. People were beginning to stare. Their darkened eyes glared at our table, before whispering to themselves, and the empty seats beside them. Dad sighed, taking another sip from Mom's glass. I furrowed my brows. All of the tables had one empty seat, one singular seat that no one occupied. Troy stopped crying as Mom walked near the empty seat at our table. He laughed, his small hands motioning at the sixth seat. Mom was too relieved to even notice how odd the baby reacted as she sat him back down on the high chair to rest her feet. Troy didn't take his gaze away from the empty seat, clapping and laughing while kicking his feet. "You drank all my wine?" Mom said, looking exasperated at Dad as her glass sat empty beside her plate. "Yeah, there's another glass right there anyway." He paused. The third glass was empty too. "You drank the other one too?" Mom said, trying too hard not to raise her voice. But Dad couldn't muster up a response to even defend himself as he looked at the third empty glass. No, I didn't," he said, barely forming a coherent sentence. Mom sighed. "You'd better pray that girl brings back the whole bottle." The waitress returned, but not with the bottle. She carted in a whole bonsai tree in a tray before placing it in the middle of the table. The tree had small pockets of food dangling from the branches. Each of us tried it, taking a bite of the round, bubble-sealed food. It was fun. I wasn't sure what to make of it, actually. The shell felt like a thin layer of sensitive plastic, and as I popped it into my mouth, a burst of flavor coated my tongue. Floral, yet savory and sweet at the same time. Claire said hers tasted like lavender mint. "So like laundry soap. You are eating soapy sacks, sis?" I asked, barely containing my laugh as she shoved me. The appetizers arrived one after another, each more ridiculous than the last. I couldn't understand why anyone would pay so much money for food that looked like science experiments, but every time I reluctantly tried the food, it somehow tasted exactly like something familiar. From peeled onions resembling a tapeworm on the plate, drizzled in olive oil and breadcrumbs, to deconstructed burgers. Each component of a burger is turned into a ball before being pierced with a stick. The nugget was the strangest so far. The appetizer was a barely formed duck embryo, housed inside thin, crispy strings forming a nest, blanketed on a toasted wonton skin. Its eyes were pitch black, and from what you could make out was the head still barely separating from the rest of its body. Claire looked as though she was about to burst into tears when I turned to her. She looked at the duck embryo with pity. I can't eat this," she mumbled. Mom looked perplexed before Dad spoke. "It's good to try new things, Claire. You can't appreciate what you don't discover." Dad ate a whole nest as Claire looked mortified. "Dad, don't eat it." "Honey, I think we should just return this. It doesn't look appetizing," Mom said. "Nonsense. It's fine, I'll eat it." Dad practically finished the whole plate as we watched him eat all 8 nests. The 3 of us sat in silence watching him eat, before he gulped down the whole glass of water in one breath. Troy didn't understand what was happening on the table, and quite frankly, we didn't either, although he was more particularly occupied by the empty seat opposite to him. The empty plate with untouched utensils looked proper, ready, waiting. Troy giggled again, kicking his feet under the table as the waitress came back. She took the used plates before setting down 6 different plates. Claire and I let out a sigh of relief, realizing the food finally looked normal. Mom had what looked like chicken Alfredo. Claire's plate was a plate of lasagna. Troy had a bowl of tepid mushroom soup, and mine was a classic spaghetti with a palm-sized meatball on the top. Dad had a plate of what looked like steak and potatoes. The potatoes looked mashed with gravy sauce on top, but the meat looked red. "Richard, that's too undercooked. We need to return." Mom paused as she watched Dad eat the undercooked steak. It bordered between rare and raw, as each slice he took to put into his mouth juiced with red liquid. Too sheer to be blood, but too red to be water. He happily ate his meal, pairing it occasionally with the mashed potatoes before turning to us. "Go on, it'll get cold." He gestured at our food before we too took bites of our own meals. Mom occupied herself with her food, slightly shifting in her seat to move away from Dad, while Claire helped Troy eat his soup, taking bites off of her own meal occasionally. I ate my own meal as well, though I was better off eating nothing at all, as my taste buds barely registered the food. My mind was occupied with the sixth plate between Dad and me. My fork balanced the giant ball of beef, as my eyes trailed towards the curling heat steaming from the plate a few feet away. The dish looked like a plump pouch of sheer flesh, resting on top of an orange sauce. I jolted back slightly, seeing a seam tear open, a clean, straight slice, before small intestines began to pool out along with a soup of thick cream liquid. I checked the food card I set aside, and right on the main course category, my eyes settled on the Babe, a pound of steamed, milk-fed baby goat intestines, cooked with mushroom raw, wrapped within the goat mother's flavorful rumen, served with the in-house citrus sauce. Mom? I muttered under my breath. I wasn't sure if my mother heard me the first time, as I was about to call attention to the sixth plate, but the meatball on my fork finally slipped off as it rolled down onto the floor. A wet slap hit the ground before the sphere disappeared beneath the table. I felt a heated glare against the skin of my nape. When I turned, I saw Dad's eyes towards me, blank, empty as his mouth opened to speak. I caught a glimpse of his bloody teeth, the once white teeth he meticulously maintained, and encouraged Claire and I to do the same. The man who emphasized on the importance of hygiene was a far cry to what I was seeing now. "Put it back on your plate. It's rude to make a mess," Dad said. The red juices from his meal lined the edges of his mouth. I got off my chair reluctantly. Before getting to my knees, lifting the layers of tablecloth, I was met with a darkness bordering on pitch black. I squinted, trying to make out where the ball of meat could have been until I was staring right at it. In front of my face was the meatball clasped within an outstretched hand towards me. My throat practically clamped shut as my breathing halted, my own hand uncurled by itself right under it. As it handed it to me, my eyes never left the dark. It never left the sight of the aged, grayish-pale hand, with nails too long and dull. I felt my hand tremble as the meat slopped against my palm. The black shadow or outline I had been looking at, or what felt like minutes, had moved. And that's when I finally saw light peek from the other side of the table. The heart in my chest dropped. Through the small hole of torn fabric, I saw Troy's feet dangling, wearing only one shoe, as the other had already fallen under the table. He was inching closer and closer. The only thing keeping him held on to the seat was the harness holding him to the chair. Dropping the meatball, I practically jumped from under the table before rushing towards Troy, unhooking the harness and carrying him into my arms. The baby began to cry as I held him close. "There's something under there. We have to leave," I practically yelled out. I didn't care if I was drawing attention from other diners. "What are you talking about? Alan, sit down," Mom said. "No, we have to leave. We have to go now," I said. Dad's face hadn't changed. He wasn't even reacting to a thing I was saying. Meanwhile, Claire was at my side as she cooed to calm Troy. Mom was trying to get a hold of the situation, but as she stood, the table began to shake, while Dad sat on his own, unmoving in his seat. Every unfinished food on the table began to topple to the floor as Mom backed against the wall, holding her purse. The waitress came back while the table shook violently, and she sighed. "I'm afraid you'll be asked to leave. We've been receiving some complaints about the commotion from your table," she said as I rushed past her, with Claire following behind. Mom dragged Dad as we all rushed out of the restaurant and into the elevator. I watched as the waitress and maitre d' stood just outside by the glowing sign, or Rago's, before the elevator door ultimately closed the barrier between our family and the restaurant. What was?" Claire muttered, but her words barely made it out as she, too, could barely process what had happened. We waited in the lobby where Mom demanded that the receptionist let her use the phones. Shortly, Granddad came by taxi. Mom told Gran that Dad couldn't drive, that he had too much to drink in the restaurant, to which he scolded him on the hotel lobby's couch for being irresponsible. But Dad barely listened. He just stared at the floor before Mom gave him the ticket from Dad's suit jacket to get the car from the chauffeurs. During the ride, Dad was shoved to the back seat while Mom sat on the passenger seat, and the three of us children were in our usual spots. Claire and Troy had fallen asleep while Mom spoke to Gran about what happened in the restaurant. Gran only listened as he drove, while my eyes trailed to Troy's shoeless foot. I lay my head on him gently, thankful that my baby brother was safe from whatever it was under that table. Though it felt like the storm had passed, I could still feel the lingering stare, the feeling of eyes glaring towards me, at the back of my head, and on the skin of my nape. As weeks and months had gone by since that day, Dad became an alcoholic. After work, he would come home to drink more than 3 glasses of wine. I noticed the strain in Mom and Dad's relationship. They no longer greeted each other with kisses before and after work. Mom would sometimes sleep in Claire's room, and this became the new normal for us, even if it never truly felt normal beneath the underlying feeling none of us could address. It had been years since that faithful dinner. Dad had passed from alcohol poisoning alone after I graduated college. Mom and Dad were already divorced by heart years before he passed, taking us with her to live with Granddad. Claire, Troy, and Mom still lived together in Manchester, while I had to move to London for work. Although many years had passed, and sometimes I do find myself thinking it was all just in my imagination, that maybe I really did make up whatever was hiding under the table. But whether it was real or not, I still found myself checking and peeking beneath other tables from time to time, with a lingering thought that perhaps the vacant seats we ignore were already taken to begin with. I slowly paced back and forth through the upper apartment of the entire home we were renting from an unsavory landlord. Despite his searching for answers to his life's problems at the bottom of a bottle, he cobbled together a 2-story home which gave safe harbor to my quaint family. My daughter, Rose, was finally fast asleep, gripping my loose white t-shirt. I sighed quietly with relief, as this was not the first night we had trouble putting her down for extended sleep. Rose had just hit the milestone of 7 months old. By now she was able to sleep mostly through the night, providing much-needed sleep for myself and her mother, by not requiring feeding every 2 hours. For the first few days as a 7-month-old, she was as precious as could be, wistfully snoring away the moonlit hours, with no crying or fussing, allowing some hard-earned rest to her parents. While I could function for 5 hours minimum, my wife struggled more with the lack of sleep. I did right by my wife, offering endless support. It was the least I could do after she pushed our 8-pound, 7-ounce miracle free from her gutty works. It was an interesting time being a parent. I couldn't help but smile as I sat on our sectional couch in the living room, finally allowing my eyes to close for the night. My daughter safely deposited into her crib. No sooner did I relax, did a cacophonous wailing echo throughout our apartment. Bolting upright, I quickly strode into my daughter's room, opening the door quietly as I possibly could to minimize any distress the poor child was dealing with. Despite the incessant wailing, Rose calmly slept. Her mouth did not move, nor did she have any expression of pain across her cherub face. She looked warm, comfortable, and altogether unbothered by the situation. I rested my hand upon her crib that I built myself, staring at her muffled movements in the darkness of her room. As my sleepy parent brain adjusted, I could still hear the crying, though it was coming from another part of the upstairs floor. I crept around slowly, as my wife was still fast asleep in bed, only to find our black cat, Felony, wide awake and sitting at the sliding glass door to our back deck. Her tail twitched and brushed the cold linoleum as her ears perked up at the increasingly distressing wailing. It sounded just like Rose on her worst day, if she absolutely wasn't having it. Walking up to Felony, I scratched her backside. She calmly turned her emerald eyes toward my face and let out a quiet meow, as if whispering to me not to disturb whatever was making that terrible racket. Sitting on the cold linoleum floor, staring out at the night sky offered me some perspective. Though the crying was worse from this part of the house, it appeared as though it was coming from below our deck. I checked my smartwatch. The ruddy cheeks and baggy eyes of mine formed a strange reflection overlapping with Mickey Mouse's whimsical, eternal smile from the 60s. The digital clock read 4:08 a.m. I opened the glass door to the back porch and stepped outside, with Felony in tow. "Call Clyde," I whispered into my smartwatch. The silent vibrato buzzed in the quiet dawn of the not-yet morning. "Mikey," the voice responded, awake, as I thought he would be. "Hey, I just put Rose down. Do you think you can—" "I'm so sorry, son. I gotta get better at this." His quick apology assured my suspicions. Clyde, my wife's father, had been living below us for the better part of a decade, helping our small family grow while also subsidizing the cost of rent to the 2-story thing our landlord called a house. The old-timer was good for money and loved Rose, as she was the first legitimate grandchild he was ever able to hold in his arms. Clyde had a proclivity for all kinds of action and horror movies, habitually watching them at a volume wholly reserved for AC/DC concerts. Aside from that one quirk, he was a stellar father-in-law and did right by us. "Thanks, man. I'll get you a coffee tomorrow." "Appreciate it, kiddo. Welcome to raising children." "How am I doing so far?" I asked, knowing he'd be straight with me. "Better than most. I'll let you get some rest." With that, he disconnected the call. I sighed and went back into the house. The caterwauling had stopped, and Felony was uninterested in the sliding glass door. Her attention was now fixated on the rustling of the shrubs I couldn't be bothered to maintain on a regular basis. A terrible smell emanated from them, likely a skunk, though I had never smelled one so foul. I gave Felony some treats, partly as a reward for helping me solve the mystery of the wailing baby, and partly to lure her back in from the impending skunk attack. I then shut the door, got comfortable on our sectional couch, and fell fast asleep. 4 hours later, with coffee in hand, I knocked on the lower door to our house. Clyde groggily opened the door and scratched the 2 caterpillars on his face he called eyebrows. "Here." He swiped at his mug, but I pulled back, letting him suffer for a moment. "I don't want to be a bother, but the headphones we gave you last Christmas, how come you don't use those?" I then handed him his coffee, which he graciously accepted. "They aren't loud enough." He took a swig on the morning brown and waggled an eyebrow. "I mean, well, they broke." "How did they break?" The cost wasn't the issue. We could easily get him another pair, but it was upsetting that a man so good with older technology could scarcely keep a pair of analog headphones in good condition. Tried to turn them to max volume with that little wheel doohickey. It snapped and broke the volume control. I can't get any sound in them anymore. "Sorry." He looked downcast. I suddenly felt as if I had kicked a small puppy. I relented. "Well, alright, man. Just no more late-night horror movies anymore. That wailing was terrible." I paused when he furrowed his brow in confusion. "What?" "Mikey, I was watching Casablanca." "Good one." I wasn't a fan of the classics, but there was no way in hell a crying baby was in Casablanca. "No, seriously, look." Kyle beckoned me into his neatly kept apartment. He had an expansive collection of physical movies and multiple combination DVD and Blu-ray players. The prize of his collection was a vintage Sony SL8000 Betamax player. It rarely saw use, but sat atop a pedestal, closely among the VHS devices that absolutely dominated the market at the time. On his coffee table, with his Marlboro pack of cigarettes and a drained glass of bourbon, still sitting next to a mostly full bottle, was the VHS copy of Casablanca. The tape that rested in the sleeve had been inserted into the fourth most available VCR closest to one of his old tube television sets that he utilized for the experience. Refresh my memory. Do any babies cry in that movie? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe when Humphrey Bogart said, "Here's looking at you, kid," it could have been possible that his delivery, although perfect, would have upset a baby nearby. Mikey, you're a new parent. This is the first time you and Angela have ever done something like this. Look, go to work. I'm off today so I can take Angie and Rosie out for some dinner, and you can catch up on some sleep when you get home. I nodded along to his prattling. I knew what I heard last night. I didn't think it was some fluke. Even Felony heard something. I was unfamiliar with what kinds of noises a skunk could make, but it certainly wouldn't be crying. I figured Clyde was right. I just wanted to be a good dad. The opportunity of fatherhood was something that had happened once before, but was ripped away from me. Yeah, okay. You're right. Thanks. We're family. You're a good dad. Even the best of dads need a break now and again. Clyde clapped me on the shoulder, and I left for work. I couldn't focus a lot on my tasks that day. The mundane office job I had was better than most. Free coffee, a gym across the hall, lots of downtime between calls on the weekends. Something kept digging at me. Clyde called me a good dad, which was kind, but I'm sure he wouldn't if he knew some of the earlier choices I made in life. I was sweet on his Angela. The anatomy of our love blossomed when I first met her at church. Angie and I had been in love for a few years, and I took it slow. But before Angie, there was Veronica. She was the first woman I had married. It was a different love than Angie. Angie was safe, and she had a good work ethic. She wasn't about taking risks, nor was she unpleasant to be around. She had a beautiful smile and was traditional in all aspects of homekeeping. I had to fight her just to do chores around the house. But Veronica, she was something else entirely. Veronica oozed freedom. She was an untamed, mythical dragon forever soaring among the clouds. This woman could turn any mundane encounter into an adventure. She lived fast and hard, and loved just as equally. When I had proposed to her all those years ago, I was sure she'd laugh in my face, but she surprised me. Okay, lover boy, make me yours. She was the Mary Jane to my Peter Parker. Everything she did was crazy, and I was just happy to be along for the ride. She was full of beautiful life and vim until she got pregnant. Veronica changed completely. Around her friends, she was still this legend among legends, but she slowly turned insular. No longer did she feel like going out, or doing the fun things we did. She wasn't about drinking, or drugs, or partying that way, but you can be sure she would be the first at the front of the concert venue, dancing like crazy to whatever songs were on the playlist. At 20 weeks, when we found out it was going to be a girl, Veronica snapped. She practically shoved her denim skirt back down and pushed the ultrasound tech to the ground. I hastily apologized while I chased after my then pregnant wife. She got in the driver's seat of our Mustang and glared daggers at me as I got in. I can't do girls, Mikey. Nuh-uh. No way. She was upset, and now had been venting, driving erratically across the back roads that wove through the dense forest, which would take us back home. Her eyes were tear-stained, and she would constantly take her hand off the wheel to rub away the rogue tears with the heel of her palm. Though I hated it, she still smoked small puffs of cigarettes, but when she was livid, the long drag of nicotine was the only master that could tame her foul temper. Veronica would only let go of the wheel once, to fetch a Belmont from within her purse, annihilating the dart much like Dracula wished he could. Why not? I thought you'd be thrilled. You'd make the coolest mom I'd ever know. The compliment was lost on her. I held on to the whoa handle in the passenger seat, regretting not pulling her out of the driver's seat before we began this cursed voyage. No way. My mom was a see you next Tuesday. She treated me like crap, like I was nothing. Tears streamed down her face. That doesn't mean you'd treat our little girl like that. It's a blessing, babe. How good will it feel to be an even better mother than your mom? I never would get anything further from Veronica, as it was destined a tree would fall in our path. As her one hand was free wiping away her tears, she overcompensated with the other, lurching the car over the cliff down into the forest below. I don't remember much of what happened during the rolling of our car, but I remember being thrown quite a distance. Checking myself, I found wounds, but I could still stand, though my locomotion was poor. Feeling around the vital areas, I only found blood when touching the back of my head. When I broke from the delirium, what I saw would be etched into my memory forever. Veronica was dead. Her neck snapped and bent at an odd angle. Her eyes and mouth were permanently in a surprised expression, as the vertebrae of her spine stuck out from her neck, without breaking skin. There seemed to be an internal pooling of blood from the odd angle of her neck. The bulging nightmare gawped from broken branches at me, a Euclidean tapestry of unending horror. Though it was assuredly broken, looking like a pimple yet to pop, the swelling red liquid rose to the point that it just couldn't penetrate her skin. Something must have detached from the car, as her belly was split wide open. The morbid cesarean performed on her by what was likely car or tree shrapnel was horrific. Her lower intestine was sagged somewhat, and the umbilical cord, complete with what was still my developing daughter, rested just below on the ground. Out from the majesty of her eviscerated womb, our unborn daughter, who was still attached to the mother, quivered in the cold. I stood stock still, shocked at the carnage that lay before me. I could only stare at the underdeveloped infant that was my unnamed daughter as it struggled to survive. Overcome by the accident and bleeding from my head, I didn't know what to do. The poor child, not yet made for this earth, expired, its little lungs unable to suck air or cry. The horrible noise it made as it took its last breaths on this plane of existence were mucus-filled cries, not loud enough to be anything considered human, but they would haunt me to this day. All the time, all I could do was weep. I took the discarded remains of our child and placed it further ahead in the woods, hastily burying it with leaves and twigs. Her glassy eyes looked at me from beyond the veil. I don't know if it was shame on that small face that glared at me, or if it was upset at its circumstance. It was the best I could do at the time. I later lied to the paramedics who arrived on scene upon me calling for assistance, and said I had been out for some time. I made a great effort to hide my tracks leading to our unnamed baby's grave. I didn't want to ever relive the memory of the alien creature of my wife's insides, warbling as it died. The guilt would still bubble over sometimes as I held Rose tight to my chest. I lamented the life unlived from my first child, the one that would never be. "Mikey, you okay?" Snapping out of my haze, far from the hellish forest, the buzzing lights of the call center centered me. I turned to see one of the other leaders on duty, waving a hand in my face. "Getting enough sleep there, bud?" "Yeah, sorry. Parenthood is tough. This is you in 3 weeks, Michelle. Though I figure since you're growing the child, you'll probably be more tired." She smiled and rubbed her belly to my response. "Yeah, I start my maternity leave tomorrow. I'm excited. Rick keeps asking how you've been doing, And I tell him you look tired each and every day. He said he's gonna take some paternal leave to help me for the first little bit. I advocate for that. I would take more if I could, to be honest. Tell him to take 2 months, not 1. I will, thanks. Hey, it's not super busy. I can cover for you if you want to go home. She didn't have to ask me twice. I clocked out from my desk and gave her a hug. She waved as I raced home to go to bed. The drive home was 4 minutes and 8 seconds. I was still groggy by the time I climbed the stairs and unlocked the door. Angie was still home, and Rose was in good spirits. I mumbled to her one word, sleep, and passed out on the couch. I could hear Rose babbling happily in the ether of my dreams. Eventually I heard the front door open and then close. The smell of pizza woke me out of my coma. I found a note on the box. Triple cheese, just as you like it. We're out for dinner. My dad said you needed a night off, and Rose needs to learn about restaurants. Plus I'm excited for the kids under 3 eat free deal. We'll be home later. Love, Angie. The first bite of the slightly cold but still incredibly greasy pizza uplifted my spirits. I cried a single tear of joy that my creature comforts were still looked after by my wife. Angie was certainly a lover, more true than the sun. Gifted by Christ himself. My father once told me that marriage is split 60-40. The trick of the split is that both halves of the partnership were always trying to be the 60 in that split. The bliss I felt did not last long as Felony suddenly darted towards the back of the apartment and sat stock still at Rose's bedroom door. I heard a muffled cry from her bedroom. My heart leapt into my chest. I reread the note Angie had left me. Rose needs to learn about restaurants. Clearly Rose wasn't here. This certainly wasn't a restaurant. What was making that god-awful noise? I sent Angie a text. Rose is with you, right? It was a stupid question, obviously, but I had to be sure. I didn't get a response right away, so I slowly began the long walk to the back room. Every crease in the floorboards and creak from my weight caused me great unease. What was happening? What am I walking into? Why is it upset? What is it? More questions raced through my mind as I slowly opened the door to the bedroom. I didn't turn on the light. The only ambient lighting that shone through the curtains was the setting sun. The crying continued, though it wasn't as loud as it was before. Felony suddenly stood up, her hackles raised as she made a low hiss, not wanting to step a single one of her paws into the room. It's okay, girl. Shh, I'll be okay. I didn't truly know if I would be. Felony stood her ground, but walked no further. The dread of stepping closer to whatever was making the noise made my heart hammer loudly in my chest. As I took a single step into the room, my phone vibrated. The crying continued, this time louder. Slowly I read the message, now horrified at what I might find. Rose is here with me and my dad. Attached was a picture of my beautiful daughter with spaghetti sauce on her porcelain features. I looked into the crib, which had a lumpy figure, moving within the blanket. I tried to rationalize what it was that was wailing so maliciously. An odd, humorless thought of a vengeful skunk permeated my brain. Taking a breath, removing the blanket, I fell back screaming in sheer terror. Veronica's baby, my other daughter, had found its way to me. The umbilical cord clung to the child and its stout features. Its skin, her skin, was mottled and red, though she would have been 20 weeks old at the time. Whatever epidermis that would have been forming gave a sinewy appearance. Was battered by an unkempt forest floor. Dried leaves and mud were spattered on the creature. It had 2 overlarge glassy eyes that had a yellowed appearance in the sclera. She lacked a nose, but instead had a pushed-in slit and cleft palate where the nose should be. The impossible horror of her mouth had 2 sets of sharpened teeth on the top and bottom. and the mouth opened at a grimace that would be immaterial for a regular baby. The shape of the horror could almost be described as avian. This undulating creature from my personal hell climbed over the edge and lowered itself to the floor. I scrambled back towards the doorway, but hit the corner of the door frame, hurting myself in the process. With every movement it made, a feeble step, or it attempting to stand, then falling on unformed legs, with no joints to support it, an ungodly squelching noise came with it. It hoisted itself up on its 2 legs, and then fell forward clumsily on its talons. With every failed attempt to stand and walk, it shrieked in agony as it inched ever closer to me. I could see a prehensile tongue flick out, much like a crawling lizard, wafting through the air, trying to determine where I was. The terrible howl continued, Felony raising her own into the fray. The orchestra of madness reached its zenith when courage finally found me. I flicked on the bedroom light. Gone was the murky dimness, the room now bathed in a comforting light. The monstrosity, my unborn child, that terrible thing, was no longer there. Any viscera it had left in both the bassinet or the floor of Rose's room was gone. Felony and I both were confused, and still rattled from the experience. You saw that too, girl? The emerald green eyes of my cat gave me a knowing look. My phone was vibrating. 6 missed calls from Angie. What was perhaps only a minute was in actuality half an hour. I immediately called her back as I searched Rose's room for the maleficence that lingered within it. Michael, are you okay? She was stern, using her motherly voice. Angie only ever called me Michael when she was with Rose. A little rattled. I got some sleep but had a terrible nightmare. You don't sound so good. Pizza was a bad call? No, hun, pizza is great. Listen. I could hear movement in the living room. I lurched my body out and could see Felony playing with one of her toys. Her temperament was solid, so I felt safe for the moment. I have to go for a bit of a drive. I gotta go up north about an hour to the other office for IT shenanigans. Since I left early, they wanted me to head over and check on some things with the new employees. It was a crappy lie, but I needed something. This late at night? My wife saw through it immediately. Yeah, it's because I left early that they're making me do it. The other team leads that could be available don't have access to a car. I'm the only one that does. I sucked at lying. Well, alright then. Hey, save some pizza for Rose. I want to give her a small bite to see what she thinks. I only had a single slice before falling back asleep. There's plenty left. Okay, say bye to Daddy, Rosie. Angie put the phone up to Rose on speaker. I could hear the beautiful babbling of my living daughter. I wept, as only a father could. I could see Rose for who she was now, and imagined who she would be in the future. I didn't know if I would see it after tonight. Bye, honey. Daddy will be home late tonight. Be good for your mom. We said our goodbyes, and I silently prayed for Rose. I couldn't let this thing near her. Something had to be done. I cursed the weather as it grew tumultuous on the drive toward the unborn child's resting place. The rainfall began no sooner than I left my apartment. I said a possible final goodbye to Felony and left a note for Angela. I admitted everything, told her about Veronica, of who she knew, but also the unborn daughter, of whom I buried hastily, that she did not know about. The image still vexed me, the unborn girl who was never meant to be. Though I didn't hear her cries as I drove, the thunder, crash, and lightning gave all the pageantry of her misery. I couldn't be certain that my plan would work, though I had to try. In my hasty preparation, on my way to the end of the beginning, I searched the internet for curses, any sort of malignant power, anything related to harm done to children. Aside from the biblical threat from Jesus Christ himself, warning me of the fate of gnashing teeth and great weeping I would receive for my transgressions, I found a single hit. Pharaoniac. The word was Slavic in origin and belonged to a subset of Scandinavian folklore that related to the mistreatment of unborn children. I didn't know what she was, but she certainly had been mistreated all those years ago. Of the few stories perpetuated from any folk stories, or video games that strung similar chords, the end result to break the curse was the same: make it right. I would give her a proper burial, hopefully appeasing her. Eventually I reached the same hairpin turn, which once had a fallen tree, though it was a few years since our crash. I could still see the area of the forest the Mustang had ruined. There was an overgrowth, but nothing I couldn't navigate. I had a flashlight clipped to my high-visibility overcoat, as well as reflective tape to help mark my passageway back to my car. Before I could make my way down the precarious embankment toward my destination, a horrible screech of tires and crash of metal interrupted any thoughts I had. Though I believe I had pulled over far enough, the rain caused visibility to be poor, and as such a tractor trailer slammed into my car. The resulting aftershock launched me over the guardrail, and I tumbled headfirst into a thicket of darkness. A familiar sensation overtook me as I fell. I could see the past as it happened. I felt all the rules of the Mustang I was once in match this future that I had yet to experience. I could see Veronica, panicking in the car, holding on to her belly. Despite all things I had believed, it relieved me to see her in her last moments, show love to the child we could have had. I felt my body strike something with a wet thud and I passed out. I woke an unknown amount of time later. The rain was still falling, though not as harshly. I sucked wind and checked my body for injuries. My ankle was twisted completely around. The pain was indescribable, like 1,000 tiny knives all cut it at once. From every angle, I checked my flashlight, relieved to see it still worked. Through the murky bramble of wet and autumn leaves, I was shocked to see the site of our crash. I wasn't sure if I should thank God or curse him. I stood weakly, looking for a branch to help support my weight. Luckily, there were thick enough sticks. I could cobble together a makeshift crutch, hobbling my way to where I had buried her, or at least where I thought I had buried her. I could see a disturbance in the ground. It had been years, but I was prepared in the event wildlife had got to her. Digging up the hastily dug grave I once created for her, I found small lumps of viscera, which I assumed to be remnants of my little girl. I cried, thinking of Rose. What a fate that could have been hers. Would I bury her like this too? How could I have been so uncaring? The task at hand, with pain and blood slowly ebbing from my wounded ankle, I resolved to make things right. I took whatever discarded rotted lumps of meat that were within the hole and wrapped them from a piece of my garment. I reburied them and used sticks to mark the gravesite. I prayed the Lord's Prayer, weeping through the verses. My breathing had become ragged. I removed the flashlight from my coat and re-examined myself. I could feel a piercing pain in my abdomen. As the rain still fell, it was hard to see what was wrong, but I wasn't sure I would have much more time to do what needed to be done. I finished the grave, scrawling her name into the cross of sticks. My ruined fingernails and broken body finally sighed as I finished with her name, Anna. My work was completed. I leaned back against the closest tree to the grave. Terror overcame me again as the same putrescent creature in Rose's bed crawled from just beyond the gloom in the forest. It was still frightfully deformed and repulsive to look at. The rain pinging against its broken body made it shudder. For the first time since I laid eyes upon the creature, I felt pity. What sort of father could leave his daughter alone in such a condition? I swallowed, tears welling up in my eyes. Anna, come here. Come sit with Daddy. If it could be called a smile, the multiple rows of teeth all at once twisted into a childlike grin. It didn't hurry toward me, but crawled with a hastened speed. The smell of it was unbearable. The rotted flesh of a carcass mixed with spoiled meat. I laughed mirthlessly, knowing now for certain what had made the rustling in the shrub those few nights ago. The prehensile tongue came out and licked one of the glassy yellow eyes, bulging from its horrible face. The crying began to waver. It was replaced with a strange cooing noise emerging from the mounts. No, from Anna. No longer was I plagued by its caterwauling. My heart felt at ease and my body less heavy. I did you wrong, Anna, but no more. I've marked where I left you and I've named you. I will always love you, just as much as Rose. I did this for her, and for you. I wasn't sure if she could understand me, but the unsettling fetal anomaly looked and listened to what I had to say. If it could comprehend me, I hoped that my words reached it. I felt as though I was forgiven. The mottled burden, my unborn daughter Anna, closed its murky eyes and began to snore, near the wound in my abdomen. I'm sorry, was the last thing I said. I stroked her coarse skin atop her head. Soon everything went dark, and I fell away into the embrace of nothingness. They found me a day later, half-starved with severe blood loss. This was due to the letter I left my wife. I don't recall many questions, though I was in no condition to answer any of them. I believe one of the responding EMTs asked me, "Who's Anna?" I just laughed. Couldn't he see? I was later committed, as I felt I was thoroughly unwell. It was mostly my choice, which Angie and Clyde respected. I told them about what I had experienced. They didn't believe me. Not many did. They still visited me regularly, and Angie remarried after a few years. Rose grew into a fine young woman, and she still called me Dad. I told her to be mindful of her mother and listen to her stepfather. Rose would tell me all about her school, her grades, boys she liked. It was a sense of normalcy, though nothing could ever truly be normal again. Her sister was often upset that I never introduced her, but I told her time and time again, Rose wasn't ready yet. Clyde would visit from time to time. He looked at me as though I was a caged animal. Despite his wariness, Clyde listened to what I had to say and believed me when I told him about Anna. He asked me what Anna looked like. I had attempted to draw her once, from my memory, foggy as it was. Every time I put pen to paper, the image wouldn't look quite right. The doctors who had approved my drawings deemed me unfit for re-entry. I soon stopped trying to explain what I could see, or who was there if only to be left alone to my own devices. But Anna was with me. Her many rows of teeth and mottled skin, her beautiful glassy eyes and prehensile tongue, which would affectionately bathe me in kisses whenever I returned to my cot. In the room I was allowed. She was a good girl, and I was glad that I had her. Her angelic wings would spread out and cover us while we napped together. I loved her, and rocked her to sleep nightly, ensuring she never cried again. My precious daughter, my little angel, Anna. I still can't explain what happened that night. This happened when I was around 12 years old, and it's something I've never been able to explain. Even now, I can remember it as clearly as if it happened yesterday. Every now and then, I find myself replaying that night in my head, trying to make sense of it, but I never can. For years, I've been telling myself to write this down, so here it is. My parents owned a restaurant, which meant they worked late most evenings. Because of that, my older brother and I would spend hours outside with the other kids who lived in the neighborhood. We'd play football, hide and seek, ride our bikes, and explore the area until our parents finished work. My brother, I'll call him Tom, always took me everywhere with him, so although I was younger, I spent most of my time with his friends. One thing about our neighborhood was that you could always tell when someone was home. At night, the lights would shine through the blinds, and you'd often see the flicker of a television. It was just one of those places where everyone knew everyone. That becomes important later. One of Tom's friends, I'll call him Richard, was fascinated with spiritism. At least, that's what he called it. He was always talking about strange games like the compass game and other rituals that kids somehow got into. He claimed that if you followed the rules correctly, you could communicate with spirits or even see deceased relatives. I never really believed any of it. I was only 12. And most of the conversations happened between Richard and my brother while I quietly listened nearby. Then one night, everything changed. I remember it was dark, and we were standing near a row of parked cars where we usually hung around. Richard looked completely different from his normal self. He was crying. I'd never seen him cry before. My brother walked over to him and asked, "What's wrong?" Richard looked terrified. "This is driving me crazy," he said. "I'm really scared. I've been playing those stupid games, and strange things have started happening." He pointed towards the house of an elderly man who lived nearby. I'll call him Bart. Bart had recently passed away. Richard explained that ever since Bart died, he'd noticed something that didn't make sense. During the day, the house looked exactly as you'd expect. Empty, but at night the lights would come on, and you could see what looked like a television flickering through the half-closed blinds. As he pointed, my brother and I looked over. Sure enough, the lights were on. From where we were standing, we could clearly see light coming through the windows. There was also the unmistakable flickering glow that looked exactly like a television playing inside. Then Richard quietly said something that made my stomach drop. "Bart died last week." My brother and I just stood there staring at the house. Trying to think logically, my brother finally said, "If Bart's dead and nobody lives there anymore, someone must have broken in. We should call the police." Richard was shaking. I'd never seen him like that before. He'd always been the toughest kid in the neighborhood. He'd grown up in a rough area and wasn't the type of person who scared easily. Around that time, another neighbor arrived in his car. He was older than us, probably somewhere in his 20s or 30s. As soon as he saw Richard, he knew something wasn't right. After hearing what he'd seen, he called the police. We waited for what felt like an hour or two before a police car finally arrived. Richard explained everything to the officers. After explaining, they decided to enter the house in case someone had broken in. They used a tool to unlock the front door and disappeared inside. We stood there waiting. A few minutes later, the officers came back outside. One of them told us there was nobody inside. No lights, no television, nothing. I remember feeling completely confused. Then one of the officers said something I'll never forget. He told us they'd checked the electrical supply, and the main fuse had actually been removed by the electricity company. From what I later learned, that's something that can happen when a property has no active electricity amount. The house shouldn't have had any power. It was impossible. Then something happened that's always stayed with me. An elderly woman suddenly appeared. I don't remember seeing her walk towards us. I don't remember where she came from. She simply appeared. She looked directly at me, my brother, and Richard. Then she calmly said each of our names before saying, "Don't worry, I'm taking care of this house." That's the last thing I remember. Everything after that is blank. I don't remember going home. I don't remember speaking to the police again. I don't remember anyone explaining what had happened. It's as if that part of the night was erased. Even now, all these years later, I still think about it. Who was that woman? How did she know our names? How did we all see lights and what looked like a television in a house that didn't even have electricity? I carried on playing in that neighborhood for years afterwards. Eventually, another family moved into Bart's house, and nobody ever mentioned that night again. But I never forgot it. Every so often I still find myself replaying those moments in my head. The light, the empty house, and the old woman who has seemed to appear from nowhere.